The Certainty Principle by David Light, Chapter 6. H is for Horizon. My horizon is forever. Quote, never forget your horizon is forever, unquote. Jack Bogle, The Bogle E-Blog, 2013. Quote, what I would recommend to people is that they always take a long-term point of view. I think this is something about which there's a lot of controversy. A lot of people, and I'm not one of them, believe that you should live for now. I think what you do is think about the great expanse of time ahead of you and try to make sure that you're planning for that in a way that's going to leave you ultimately satisfied. This is the way it works for me. There are a lot of paths to satisfaction, and you need to find one that works for you. Unquote. Jeff Bezos, 2008. I tend to be myopic. I tend to defer to what's in front of my face, in my immediate proximity in time and space. What's in the fridge, I tend to eat, even too much. What's on TV, I tend to watch, regardless of the quality. But this tendency to defer to convenience is a formula for underachievement, or even worse. It requires will to keep my brain focused on the implications of my actions. But such perspective is the origin of the creative positive action. And no important human accomplishment from the beginning of time came from such a myopic perspective. In fact, just the contrary. The dominance of short-term temporal perspectives causes irresponsibility and suffering. In the 1946 Nuremberg trials, the Nazi leadership deferred to orders from their superiors as a way to excuse the atrocities they committed. Quote, I had received General Bader's orders to shoot prisoners, but I did not bear any responsibility. I may have thought about these things only for reasons of humanity. My commander-in-chief alone bore the military responsibility. I was only chief of staff, and as such, I was only his assistant. Unquote. The Nuremberg Tribunal, 1947. Chief of Staff von Gertzner. Von Gertzner's testimony demonstrates that his fear of responsibility prohibited him from seriously considering the implications of the order to shoot all prisoners, much less even acting on it, though he did have scruples, apparently, as mentioned, for reasons of humanity. He felt about it. Quote, we all live under the same sky, but we all don't have the same horizon, unquote. Konrad Adenauer, 1972. Konrad Adenauer was the successful chancellor of post-war Germany. His famous horizon quote underlines the brutal reality that many see much further than me. Whether I like it or not, I am confronted with a choice of temporal perspective, which I either accept with certainty or decline to circumstance. I've tried no purpose at all, ambling a path and placing one foot before the other with little motive beyond survival. I've tried giving little thought to specific goals beyond I want more stuff for me, making more money, making more of my identity. I've tried believing purpose is predestined by God or nature, a dogma-directed identity, giving little importance to my individual motivation beyond going with the flow. I've tried tangible goals, avoiding struggling and overcoming obstacles for a living, hoping someday maybe I could rest in peace. I've tried these and many more paths, and still I was unsatisfied and riddled with doubt. That is, until a conversation I had in March 2012 with the chairman of Vanguard, John C. Bogle. Quote, "We cannot escape history. No relative significance or insignificance will spare one or another of us. The fiery trials through which we pass will light us down in honor or dishonor to the latest generation. We, even we here, hold the power and bear the responsibility." Unquote. Abraham Lincoln's State of the Union Address, 1862. Imagine for a moment that Lincoln's statement is true and a provable law of physics regarding the contribution of each individual to history. That to a greater or lesser degree, each of my actions and the actions of those before and contemporary to me weave irrevocably into a fabric of each manifesting moment thereafter. Just as the wave created by each drop of rain falling on the surface of a lake combined to a torrent, so drops combine with a multitude of other actions to create my experience of reality at any given instant. Lincoln's logic is inescapable. I determine the world I experience through my choice of actions. And the lives and generations to follow will either benefit or be diminished by my choice of action. There is no escaping it. This very much fits, if you notice, into Blaise Pascal's revelation or Pascal's paradox that, well, you can go back and reference that section. Quote, "This story shall the good man tell his son, and Crispin Crispian shall ne'er go by from this day till the ending of the world, but we in it shall be remembered." Unquote. William Shakespeare, 1600, Henry V. Great speech, by the way, one of the all-time greatest ever written in the English language. But it speaks to the point that heroic actions are remembered, but even the non-heroic actions are remembered. And in fact, following Lincoln's statement, every little thing we do is woven into the manifesting instant, irrevocably. So what you do matters. 6.1, the Gospel of St. Jack. Likely that Jack Bogle would not remember my name, but I knew something about Jack Bogle. In the fall of 2012, as chairman of Magellan Leadership, we were considering candidates for our inaugural Intrepid Leader Award to recognize leaders who, like Magellan, matched their important achievements with a talent for engendering an almost numinous, that means highly loyal and engaging leadership style, loyalty among their colleagues and founders, almost religious, cult-like somewhat. One candidate for this award was John C. Bogle, founder of the Vanguard Group. Cited by Forbes as one of the top 3 financial minds of the 20th century, I'd read a few of his books and was verging on becoming a Boglehead, quote unquote, the term for followers of the financial gospels according to St. Jack. His life's work enabled millions to accumulate trillions in wealth via innovations in no-load indexed mutual funds. But Bogle's legendary reputation didn't stand on his business genius and philanthropy alone. A material pauper compared to his peers, he was an iconoclast, meaning someone who sort of fought the status quo, went the opposite way. His wisdom contained in his many books, articles, and interviews combined to elevate Jack's reputation to mythical proportions. He seemed the epitome of the intrepid leader, and I was determined that he would be the first recipient of the ILA. I was fired up with anticipation that my recruiting mission would allow me at least a few minutes conversation with this historic leader. I'd learned that great leaders like Lincoln can communicate in a few words what others can't communicate in 1,000. If I had the presence of mind to listen, these words could be life-changing, and I was going to be paying very close attention to Mr. Bogle. Following failed attempts to reach him through his publisher, I happened across his blog, the Bogle blog, and began commenting on his postings. Before long, we had a dialogue going, which would eventually lead to a telephone conversation where I pitched my case for his receiving the award. He was reluctant to engage on the topic. He'd been approached by many looking to do an expose on his leadership style of his, sorry, this is a misprint. It should be 17,000 strong Vanguard group crew. I'm not interested in that leadership stuff, quote unquote, is the way I recall his response. My sense was that he found such self-analysis uninteresting, lacking the intellectual rigor of a quantitative inquiry into the miracle of commission-free compound investment growth. I'd hit a dead end until reading a scriptural reference posted in the masthead of his blog. Here was the statement of purpose. Perhaps there was a deep and powerful current that had directed the extraordinary voyage of Vanguard, as led by Jack Bogle. Quote, "If a trumpet gives an uncertain sound, who shall prepare himself for battle?" Unquote. Interesting quote from a leadership standpoint. That's from St. Paul. Uncertain was a word that had troubled me since fourth semester physics at Cal, and Werner Heisenberg's eminent uncertainty principle was the root of it. Hupp had basically argued to my oversimplifying brain that uncertainty was a condition of human experience. How should I square Hupp with Bogle's biblical tagline that uncertainty presaged defeat? Was his leadership secret explained by his fervor to battle with fundamentals of uncertainty? I wondered if a key to his success was the certainty he created through his relentless trumpeting about the powerful wealth creation that was possible through indexed investing. Bogle came to personify his product, and I reckoned that somehow such monolithic allegiance to his mutual fund mandate, first espoused as an undergrad at Princeton, was part of what inspired multitudes to follow St. Jack. This epiphany moved me from an admirer to a devotee. Despite his reluctance to speak, I now believe that I'd cracked part of Bogle's code. I was more determined than ever to see him speaking to the members of Magellan about his other leadership keys. A contrarian and self-described introvert, venturing much beyond the quantitative financial conversations was not a priority for him. As I pursued him, I began sensing that he wished he'd never responded to my blog comment. But I kept pressing until at one point in the course of my stalking, he admonished me with a 6-word response that turned out to be the second and most important certainty key, which I refer to as St. Jack's Law. Quote, "Never forget, Dave," he said, "your horizon is forever," unquote. Bogle, the Bogle Blog, 2013. On a different, more distracted day, this statement may have passed for just another platitude, a soundbite from a writer prone to the poetic. But considering the source, it gave me pause. Why would an individual with such an unparalleled resume of financial, philanthropic, and literary achievement make such an arcane statement to a leadership stalker like me? It so happened that at the same time I'd been reading Lincoln on Leadership, Williams, 1993, and Bogle's advice reminded me of the quote from the president's 1962 address formerly mentioned. "We cannot escape history" was that quote. You can look it up. It's pretty awesome. Did Mr. Bogle and Mr. Lincoln have a common leadership denominator? Was there something fundamental in holding a mortality exceeding personal perspective that fostered followers? I began digging deep into Bogle's writings, but was unable to come up with another reference. Somewhere deep in the caverns of my learnings on leadership, St. Jack's statement began resonating. My brain began linking his remark to similar soundings in Plato's allegory of the cave, Plato 380 BC, Epictetus Enchiridion, Epictetus AD circa 125, and Marcus Aurelius Meditations, circa 170 AD. Pascal's Dilemma, 1670, Mirandola's piece in 1486, and Adenauer, and so on and so on and so on, and others who had variously referred to the benefits of unlimited perspectives on my place in the world. But what precisely was he intending by writing it to me? I asked him on his blog, no response. 6 months later, I had the chance to ask him in front of the entire Magellan audience, and he tactfully avoided a direct answer. During a face-to-face meeting in his office some weeks later, he deflected my direct question again, restating his indifference to conversations about that leadership thing. Deciphering Mr. Bogle was left to my imagination. Like Magellan's mission to discover a sea course that circled the world, understanding St. Jack's words sent me on an odyssey of discovery. One of the great minds of the 20th century had given me a glimpse of one of his operating principles, and it became my purpose to fathom its meaning. John C. Bogle passed away in 2019 without revealing to me the secret of "Your horizons are forever." This book is a chronicle of my efforts to decipher forever horizons in the context of leadership, problem solving, decision making, and action taking. I call it the certainty principle, because deciphering Mr. Bogle's guidance has brought me clarity and confidence. Any problem to which the axiom is applied is distilled and brought into proper perspective, and in the process shifted from myopia of relativity and absence of absolute values to reality of fundamentals that can only be experienced through the adoption of a very long view. My findings may or may not bear a resemblance to what Mr. Bogle himself had in mind when he planted this bug in my brain 5 years ago. He's gone, so I'll never know for certain. That said, I can testify that the guidance it has provided me has been important. It enriches every aspect of my life, reframing true achievement into the context that is, in a word, timeless. This jewel of a directive has faceted into many applications, each one adding to the brilliance of the whole. From leadership to purpose to identity to vision to duty to accountability to courage, etc., it seems that no aspect of human experience is beyond the influence of Mr. Bogle's forever horizon.